classes we need and how we organize it. So the TypeScript part is always very clean, doesn't give much errors. Okay? So if you look into my TypeScript code, all I need is a very simple model class. Okay? So that's the name, ID, department, salary. That doesn't change. Even the employee service class that I spoke about, it's the same, doesn't change. Okay? So I will have to use the HTTP client object and call it as the HTTP. And every single time I want to use a postman kind of request, I'm going to say this.http.get and then use the command. Okay? Those things were fine. My problem is with the HTML tags. Okay? So that's where I messed up a bit. So I'm going to walk you through again. So you can see I've created some components. I've created an app component. I've created an employee list component. And I've created an employee list form. So if you're wondering where these are basically from the TypeScript class. Okay? So in the TypeScript class, you can see I've called this class as app component. So the entire component is called as app component. And inside my employee form, in my TypeScript form, you can see I called my class as employee form component. Okay? So that's basically the employee form. If I want to use it inside the HTML, I have to import it. Very similarly on the list tag, if you look at the class name, I've created the class name as employee list component. Okay? So there are the three classes that I have created. One is on the app, the other is on the employee list, and the third one is on the employee form. So these are the three forms I've created, right? So I've created these classes. Now I want to connect them in my page. Okay? That's all I'm trying to do here, and this is where I messed it up. So first thing is I need to put them all in one library, which is what I'm doing here. Okay? So I'm using the Angular core. I'm going to use the browser for the open browser and testing. And you know that we need the client and the reactor. So I'm using the 4 libraries. Then these are from the Angular basic library. For my code, there are 3 pieces of code I want. The TypeScript font, which is for the application, for the list and form. There are 3 TypeScript files I created. I'm just importing all of them here on top. Okay? Then you see this is the very important part of starting my module, and this is where I messed it up badly and I got myself into error. See here what you have to do is you have to declare each of these components and then import them along with your other components. So here I'm saying I have created them, so these are declarations. Okay? So I've created an app component, I've created a list component, I've created a form component, use all of them and then use these things from the libraries. Okay? So this is where my code could not recognize because my if tag was corrupted, my for tag was corrupted. So I got to fix this and then we will do it tomorrow morning, not to worry. But as of now, I've just used the ng if tag instead. Okay? So these are the libraries, these are the classes I created. Import all of them. When my application starts, show this app component. Or when the application loads, the single application page that I want is the app component. Okay? I have not coded much except that I call the class as app component. And if you look inside here, I've extended the app component, okay? And then I said to. Okay? So if there is a form, then show the form. If there is an employee, show the employee. Okay? Otherwise, when the form if there is no employee records, load the show form. If there are employee records, then probably I'll list them. Okay? So if somebody clicks on the save button, save the employee record. Somebody clicks on the cancel button, click on the cancel button. So these are all I need. And look at my HTML page. It's a very, very simple page. Okay? I have a header. I've used the app header, but I have not coded much. I just called it as header, title, and then I put a span. Okay? So I said it's done using Spring Boot and Angular. Okay? So this is the list that I wanted to rewrite and I got myself into trouble. Okay? So what I've done here is I'm taking the employee list. If there is an employee list existing, then I want to show them. Okay? If there is no list items, then I want to open an empty form and I say show the empty form and whatever is the employee record, so that as selected. So inside the form there is going to be 2 buttons. One is called the save button, the other is called the cancel button. So you can see in my employee form tag, I will have the same. I have the employee form and then I have 2 buttons as you can see. One is to save the record, so that's the submit button. The other is to cancel. So on cancel method and then the default is on submit method or on click method. So that's basically why I don't have to say what happens when the click happens. So these are the pages I wrote, right? So when I compile this file, I should not have an error, which is where I got really pretty good confused. So I start this application, and when I click on the control open page, you can see by default there are records inside. So that's why it's landing up on the listing page. So for the fun of it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to restart the server by changing the data.sql. So normally I have to initialize, right? So this time I'm going to say don't initialize the data, start this server again. So let's see, I'm going to restart the server. I'm not creating any records. So if you look at the 8080, which is the local host 80, and then I have to look for API employees, there is no records on the back end now. I purposely silenced my data.sql so that I don't have any records. So when I do this, you can see the Angular is smart. When I come back and refresh this page, you can see it's basically coming to the listing page. There is no records to list. So there's only one add button that is being showed in the form. So when I click on the add employee, it shows the employee form. So I don't have any records. So by default, there's nothing to be listed here. So only if there is a list, I have to go through the form, print the for each statement, etc. There's nothing here. So it's an employee record form. And when I click on the add button, you can see it is going to load the employee form page. So how does this decide? You can see if it is coming to this add page, which is the main component page here. So the first thing is the main page. Then if there is a form, it's going to show the list form. If there is nothing, it's only going to use the header page. In the header page, I've just got the title, nothing more. So when there is somebody who wants to click on the add form, then I say, if the employee has clicked on the add form, I want to open up the show form, which is the employee form that I've created. So that is why when somebody clicked on this particular list, which is basically my graphical item here. So let me go back and show you. So I'm going to refresh this page. This is basically the list. So when somebody clicks on this item, I'm going to open up the show form. And the show form is going to have default values. All the default values come from my form page here. So if you look into the employee form component, which is the HTML. So if you look at the HTML page here, you see this is the page that is getting displayed. So I loaded the page. There's no error or success yet. So it's loading the page. It's called as the employee form. And then of course it's going to go and look at my default values. So you can see there is a name, and then there's this default name that is highlighted. So this form basically starts giving all the default names which is highlighted here. And when I create the form, I can actually try using any value. So let's say that you want to create some data. So let me create Alice here. Department is engineering. Salary is some $12,000. Designation, she's the senior architect. Then say create employee, creates a record. So you see this successful message, the green message that's coming. That's why I needed this variable called message. Only when the record is saved, for a second it shows the green message, then it goes into the form. If there is an error, you can see instead of green it shows the red, and then it displays the error message. So if it's a success, I show the message success, which is a green color. If it's an error, you can see it goes into an error. So wantedly I will create an error this time. So I'm going to say add employee, another record. So this time let's say Radbert. And then this is a mandatory field, right? So I leave it empty. I'll call this as, say, it's not the engineering department, it's the management department. And then of course managers are paid much more, in 1,000. Designation is senior manager. So I'm going to create. So you see that when I try to create, this page is not going to go through. It basically looks for validation. So let's say that it is some test message. I wantedly will go for a number less than 800. So you can see that the decimal minimum validator is on here. Because I try 1800, immediately it says this is not the constraint, right? So it's basically trying to tell me that it's a backend constraint. So I'm going to add in more number. and then of course I'm going to say create. I don't have a situation where I have an error, but in case I have some error, but because these are simple data types they are going through, if I have another place where I cannot put in the right data, there is some validator, you can see instead of the green it says the employee was not created. And anytime I want to edit it, I select the form, you can see it comes pre-populated. Okay? So that's why the whole logic of is it null or not null. So that's pretty much the logic, but what I completely screwed up is basically the if then else. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and clean up this example. Then of course we will redo the whole demo tomorrow morning. First thing we will do that before we go into association mapping. Does it make sense? Now there are a few things that I've highlighted here, like for example I've spoken about ng submit, ng if, ng load, etc. But I have not covered the syntax card, only those syntax card and a few other syntax card I will highlight and then I will stop. Okay? So we stopped almost in this place, right? So I said we are talking about injection and so on, okay, which is basically the service class that we created, injectable in the root. And you see none of these objects I made it as stand only, so standalone objects. So if you look at my TypeScript here, I've created this class. I gave a name for this, I gave a URL for this, but you see I did not say this is standalone. Okay? So if I say this as standalone is true, what happens is I can make this component as a standalone component, right? I can make this as standalone is true. But if you make it standalone is true, then you don't have to import it here. You don't have to import it here. Okay? You only import items that are not standalone. Standalone are like header, footer. They are included everywhere. Okay? But this page is not going to be header, footer. It is not included everywhere. That's the reason I did not use the standalone tag here. I left it to false. Okay? So I only gave a selector name and I gave a URL name. So this was the URL name that I changed as well. You remember I had a lot of compilation errors because in my first demo I've used this dot component. And when Angular created for me, it did not use the dot component. It only created employee form.html. So that's why so many compilation errors when I was doing the demo. So I removed all the component it goes through, but yet the if statement was an error. Okay, so that's why there's so much trouble. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up the workshop code. I'll also clean up the if and for so that we can try the whole demo tomorrow. Okay? But in the meanwhile, even though these are older tags, I want to talk about the ng, if, etc. So just give me a moment. So I'll touch upon a few codes that we have already used. So tomorrow when we come back and do the demo, we sort of understand what these tags are trying to do. Okay? Wow, man, even CRUD is so difficult and challenging in 2 days. I don't know how I'm going to cover all the testing frameworks. Maybe I should go easy on the testing frameworks. I wanted to try advanced state management testing, etc. So the way I see, I think I will keep it as self-learning. So I'm going to stop this here and then